Gen AI, like it, love it, hate it, it's here to stay.
One of the most disruptive technologies that I think we're seeing in any industry since the internet. No joke.
So there's a lot of good to it, and there's also threats. Using the open internet, ChatGPT at work, is exposing our important data to the public.
One of the things that's great about Ask AT&T, AT&T's implementation of generative AI, is we've brought in several AI models inside our firewall. Anything that goes into the AT&T model is only accessible to AT&T employees.
We do a lot. We scan for PII, we scan for SPI, we scan for IP addresses. It looks at the code that's generated, it looks at the sources that were used to generate it, and it makes sure that we don't generate code that is going to have a license on it that we didn't expect.
I write user stories, which are the instructions to the development team on how to write code. I use generative AI, and it typically takes 30 to 45 minutes staring at a blank sheet of paper. Now I can do it in 3 to 5 minutes. This is great for customers because AT&T will be able to do more with the same people we have and make better products with higher quality because we're AI assisted in everything that we're going to be doing in the technology space.
Team, please welcome Artecia Wilson, Andy Markus, and Mark Austin.
So today we're going to talk about a few interesting things. I want to set the stage though before I hand off and ask Andy a question. But January 3rd of this year, my life 100% changed. Andy had an idea and he's like, Artecia, I have an idea. And can you pull something together regarding natural language processing, conversational AI, generative AI, and can you do it in 2 weeks? Andy,
yeah.
Can you tell us about what was the impetus, and can you talk a little bit about AT&T's generative AI journey, how we got here, how you changed my life January 3rd?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Artesia's 2 weeks are still going. So she has the perseverance of anyone. But it's amazing that we're here in November. November is kind of the 1-year anniversary of when everything truly changed. AI is not new to AT&T. AT&T was kind of there when the term artificial intelligence was founded back in the 50s, right? We were there with IBM, with Dartmouth, with Harvard. In that, we have a long history of using AI to create really meaningful, results for the company. But this is different, right? This is kind of the next phase in that AI journey. And a year ago, like we saw, that vision, and we saw we had to get out in front of it. So we rallied the troops. We don't have masses of people working on generative AI. We have a pretty small focused team, but we're rolling it out to the company, and I think the results are going to be incredible. So what we did is, very soon after ChatGPT came out, right? We have, again, a lot of history using natural language processing, even the earlier versions of GPT, but the chat function changed everything. And what we saw was really quickly is if we did nothing, our employees were going to use this functionality, and they were going to expose sensitive information about the company in a public-facing environment. And the risk of having our information to leak out into the public domain was really intense. And so we got out in front of it. And we didn't want to do what just others did and say, we're just going to block it. We wanted to create that and solution. Like, we're going to block it to ensure that our internal IP doesn't become public domain. By the way, it did, 4 weeks later after we stopped that with another large company. But we said, we're going to create equal or better functionality that you're going to have outside, and we're going to allow our employees to have access to it. Okay, and so that's what we did. The very first thing is we created an environment where we could expose the most sensitive information we have as a company to create these use cases, but we would be comfortable that our data and our information was safe and secure. And our security team was an incredible partner in that journey. Another part of that process was, again, a key component of this is role-based access controls, right? We have our most important information as a company exposed here. We want to make sure that the right people have access to the right information. And creating those role-based access controls were super important, and our security team were great partners here. And then another incredible partner in the process, in the journey. This is as much of a partnership as it is just a technical journey, and that is partnering with our legal and our privacy and our compliance team. We had to rewrite. We had to create AI policy for AT&T. We took our AI operating guidelines. We turned that into policy that now is tied to our employee code of conduct. Because we knew with this advent of generative AI and Ask AT&T, this was going to touch everybody, not just the data scientist. But our legal and compliance and our privacy folks were enablers. They allowed us to do this in a way that we could address the concerns, but do it in a very responsible manner. And so as we talk to other companies, we see that's a stumbling block. But I just kudos to our team because our legal team helped us get over the hump in the right way. I'm going to turn over to Mark. So Mark leads our data science team, and was absolutely instrumental in all this, and talk about two of the technical issues that we've had to kind of get through.
Yeah. So in addition to Andy had great foresight in terms of, hey, this thing, if we don't lock it down, if we don't make it private and secure, it's going to expose IP out there. So we partnered with our security folks to do that. The other thing, which was a prediction, was these LLMs, it's probably going to be multiple, okay? It's not just going to be one LLM for the future. And if you watch the kind of the development of open source and other LLMs, that's what we're actually seeing happening. If you've seen this paper, I love this one paper somebody put out. It's Google has no moat, and neither does OpenAI. And it's a history of when the open source came out and Meta kind of leaked their first model out there. Within 3 weeks, they went from like 62% of GPT-4 up to 92% of the accuracy, right? So we had this prediction. We have to have our own internal Ask AT&T. We're going to have multiple LLMs there, okay? So we have Llama 2, we have Code Llama, we have GPT-4, we have NVIDIA's there. And we choose the right one for the right circumstance. Like the Code Llama is pretty amazing, right? So we have this concept of KLLMs, okay? If you put these things to work, sometimes one performs better than the other, especially with coding, right? So if you want to look at coding, one might have a copyright issue. Okay, well, if the other one doesn't have that, or if it has a different approach, or if it's more efficient, you kind of want to choose across those things. So the other thing that we said is we got to have a platform. We got to have something that we can choose KLLMs, choose the right one for the task, or put them together to solve a task. That was one thing. Now, the other thing, if you've been following it, everybody's heard about this term hallucination, okay? Hallucination was a huge problem when it first launched. GPT-3 had a lot of problems with hallucination, and we started locking it down by, we were writing prompts and challenging it itself. Like, if you really don't know, say you don't know. Are you really sure you know? And we kind of over-rotated in the beginning, and all of a sudden we had 30% that didn't know the answer. So we had to kind of loosen that up and kind of say, well, the right thing with the prompt thing. But fortunately, the LLMs have caught up a bit, right? GPT-4 is pretty good. It's less than 5%, I don't know. I think right now we have the thumbs up, thumbs down, just like on OpenAI. You give it the feedback. We look at every thumbs down. We say, why was it thumbs down? And most of the time, it's like they're asking AT&T questions. It doesn't know AT&T at the time, but we're changing that now, right? So our whole focus is, okay, GPT-4 is fantastic. It doesn't really know about internal. If I ask it, how many days off do I get if I've been here 10 years? It doesn't know that. But we have to bring all that information, and that's what we're focused on. So when Andy talked about role-based access, we're going to bring the AT&T information and teach it with documents, okay? You've heard about retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. So that's one big theme of what we're doing. So Ask AT&T is not just chat, but it's going to know about AT&T information as well. And you have to have that secure environment to do that. It was interesting, I watched the OpenAI kind of conference this week, their first dev conference. They're starting to bring RAG there, but it's very limited scale. It's like 20 files, okay? Our RAG, our AT&T is basically going to be infinite, okay? Whatever documents you bring it, we're going to be able to ask questions of that.
Yeah,
that's where it's going.
It's a great journey. And on this journey, As Mark said, out of the box, stuff's amazing, but not really amazing at a company-specific way. But we've partnered with the engineers at Microsoft, at NVIDIA, at OpenAI, and really I think we have a cutting edge approach to this, using the best algorithms there to eliminate and minimize this hallucination. And now it's really in a great spot for AT&T.
So how has Ask AT&T been rolled out, and what can we expect?
Yeah, it's another good question. Again, I talk about our partnership with our legal compliance and privacy and security teams. Technically, we were ready in February, with the rollout. But we said, we've got to make sure we understand how this is going to work. And so we used our team, the Chief Data Office team, as the test bed. And we ran it there for a good, 6-8 weeks. And then, understood, what worked well, what we needed to control, and then we started rolling it out to the rest of the company. Right now, virtually every employee at AT&T has access to this. So 68,000 employees now, management employees, will be rolling out to the rest near term. And then next step will be allowing those that work with us to access it. But the amazing thing is, Mark mentioned, the use cases. You can access Ask AT&T just like you can an OpenAI through a web interface, or we do it through Teams as well. But most of the volume comes through APIs, right? We bolt in our applications and we bolt in this functionality to it. I think we're now well over 1 billion API calls, to this service, and it's really helping everything across the board. So that's the rollout.
What are the use cases you're most excited about?
I'll let Mark tackle. I'll help him with a few.
So let me give you a big picture for a second. So I'll tell you about the ones we've kind of have on the board. But the amazing thing is after we started getting some of these initial use cases, we asked the business, tell us your use cases. And in 3 weeks, we had 260 use cases.
Yes.
And we were overwhelmed. Okay, it's how do I kind of get my head around that? How do I do a stack rank of those things? How do I do an ROI that? I think we're over 500 now.
Yes.
I got 500 use cases, right? So there's a very methodical process. We said, we can't, as CDO, Central, we can't look at them all. Can we have the business units prioritize them? So it's going through this stack rank of prioritization. Now, if I rewind the clock and tell you about what are the wins so far, I was always thinking that the first use case would be internal. I would do something like ask questions of internal data. The amazing thing is our first Gen AI use case, this is months ago, was external. And what we did is we said, hey, I have this chatbot on att.com. You go there and you kind of talk to it. And 40% of the time, it didn't know the answer. So it would go out to a human, okay? But when we looked at the chatbot, it was a rules-based chatbot, okay? And it was like, whoa, I have all this information. I can just do the Gen AI on top of it. And sure enough, we put that on top of it. This is in a couple weeks. And it cut the escalation, the 40%, cut it down to 20% overnight, okay? So the first use case was making our chatbot smarter with Gen AI. Very, very easy to do.
And not just smarter, but a much more enjoyable conversation.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I mean, so many, go ahead. Yeah.
Here's a story, okay? It's amazing. Even though we're totally upfront, we tell the person you're talking to a bot, it's transparent upfront. And you look down the conversation, all of a sudden, it's so natural, they forget they're talking to a bot. And they start apologizing to the bot. They said, you told me that a year ago. I should have known that. Is what they start talking. It's you're talking to a bot.
And many of the conversations end in thank you.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, when have you ever told an NLP system thank you? Never, right? You're hitting 0, 0, 0.
Thank you, apologizing. Yeah. It's just amazing. It's so natural there. So that was a nice early win. Some other early wins are, if I think of customer care, it's a lot of processing, conversation, stuff like that. At the end of every call, the agent is supposed to record what the call was about, summarize it, right? What was it about? What was the resolution? What did you follow up on? And sometimes, if I think of business calls and care business, some of those calls are pretty complex because the products are pretty complex, right? It would take them sometimes 3 minutes to write that summary. I could do that whole thing by just send it the transcript, right? So now we send it the transcript, and we literally do that automated, and we have 95% kind of acceptance rate from the agent that says, you nailed it, okay? You saved me that time, and we just have that acceptance there, right? So that was really cool as well. We integrated that one. That was another just a few weeks type thing. So care is another favorite one. One other one, which you kind of get out of the box, which you all have experienced, is on coding. Think software development, right? If you've seen ChatGPT, GPT-4, even GitHub Copilot is kind of focused on this, is help me write this code, generate code. Help me fix this code. I have an error. What's wrong with it? Explain this code to me. Huge improvements there. In fact, we did a trial. This is way back in the beginning. And we had 2 of our groups. We partnered with our big software coders. We said, okay, group A, you get the new toys. Group B, you do it the old way. And we actually did this multiple times. And depending on what the problem they're trying to solve and who you were talking to, like their experience level, it was anywhere with 20 to 50% faster in completing the coding task. Okay. So huge improvements out of the box, I would say, on coding as well.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, you'll see things from external agencies that say this is what you could expect. You know, we saw that in practice at AT&T.
Yeah. Now, the other ones, if I just generalize these 500 use cases right now, question and answer is a big pattern, right? I'm asking questions. Most of the time, it's AT&T internal documents. Think care. Sometimes in care, you're on with a customer, and you don't know all the answers. If you've been there a while, you know a lot of them, but you still have some things you're stumped, okay? What if I could just, the old way is they would do search the same way, right? You'd get 12 links, you'd have to click on the link, and it's the 4th link down on the 5th page, and sometimes it's multiple links. It would take them a while. We do all that with Ask AT&T now, right? So just like we look at all those links, we generate the answer for them. So Agent Assist is huge as well, just an example. But I would say out of the 500, the number one pattern is question and answer as a pattern per se. Then there's summarization, classification. Translation is big. All of our documents are in English. We got a lot of Spanish-speaking customers in the U.S., right? So all of a sudden, before the agent would have to sit there to have to manually translate it, they're looking at our English documents, they're talking to the person in Spanish, they're doing the translation side by side. We just generate that in Spanish for them, right? And you can even do that on the chatbot as well. So lots of patterns there. We're really excited about some of those new use cases.
And what I would say is that each of these is done with incredible partnership across the business. We help enable, but as Mark said, 500 use cases. Like, we couldn't do this without our business leaning in, and we're seeing that across each part of the company, right? Really leaning in. I'll give you an example. In our sustainability group, we have 30 use cases. I mean, that's an area that AI really didn't impact a lot historically. Now we have 30 use cases. I'll ask Artecia, I'll put her on the spot. Do you have a favorite use case?
Yes. So leading governance, something that excites me very much are the people that are passionate about integrating policies, procedures into the technology. If you think about technology companies, a sign of maturity is where your people do not have to think about the rules. The tools are helping them stay in compliance. And we've received probably now, I want to say, 40 different use cases that are all around taking policies from security, policies from privacy, integrating it into our technology so developers can do their job and really focus on development. They don't have to think about what are the right rules. Another use case was taking actually security parameters and integrating it into config files. Think about that. That is the gold standard for a policy writer who is probably thinking, wait a minute, no, this is really laborious, and how many people are really going to be passionate about this? There's a group of folks who are passionate about actually integrating it into the network. So those are really exciting. The work that we did, also integrating a solution to scan for copyleft, copyright into not only Ask AT&T, but also into the actual development pipeline. That, personally, I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, and on that one, we talk about using generative AI for coding, for creating code, but we have concepts that our software team has created. We're using it through all parts of the software development lifecycle. So basically, coming from user story, generating specs, generating code, generating unit test, executing unit test, the vulnerability management, on the backside. All parts of that, can really be greatly enhanced with generative AI, including making sure we don't generate code that has copyright or copyleft concerns.
Just to add on that vulnerability one, that's another favorite run. So security vulnerabilities, right? So before we used to have, you would kind of get it, you would get a flag, and it would be 4 hours to however long it takes them to figure it out. So Gen AI is taking that now, notices it, does the lookup of libraries, and it comes back and generates the code with all the right parameters of the code. You can cut and paste and put it in. Now we've also done one to automate that, just to prove that it's possible, but we're still going to have the human oversight just to make sure there. But I love the idea of, before Gen AI, it's kind of like whatever your kind of role was. If you think of the software development cycle, if you're just in coding, you kind of just that thing. Gen AI, I think, gives you the possibility to look left before you and look right after you. And you can even do some of those things. Like if you think of the whole software development life cycle, the way that we capture requirements and we turn those into code, you can almost automate that now too. Right? You're collecting all the feedback from the customers in some kind of automated way. You turn those automatically into requirements. You take the requirements, you tell it to generate the code, all of that stuff, right? So the entire life cycle, if you almost look at all these workflows, you got to look across the whole thing and make it all faster.
I will warn everybody, this is a passionate topic for me. Yeah, assessing different companies to actually do this activity for us, partnering with the teams, the developers. I don't even know if I shared this with you. I actually went to my old development team and I said, guys, now that you no longer work with me, tell me your experience. How do you know what you need to, how do you stay in compliance? How do you know what to do? What's the right thing to do? They walked me through and it came up with some ideas that we've actually integrated into the solutions. So yeah, I won't bore you guys with that. But moving into that, this is a security event. What are the threats that generative AI creates, and how are we thinking about mitigating against them?
Yeah, no, I think we'll separate that in two pieces. Misinformation, right, is the core concept of a threat here, and you can think about misinformation from a societal aspect, but also from a cybersecurity aspect. So, misinformation on the first category, it's around deepfakes, or it's around, creating a social campaign to push a message and make it appear like it has a public, perception, support. But it kind of moves into the cyber, area where, you're using generative AI for, using it to create access methods, right? A perfect example of that could be like the old school thing we all deal with, which are phishing scams, right? Phishing scams now become much more elevated with the use of generative AI. Things like fraud, right? Think about generative AI creating voice, creating images, creating video. All that could be used to create fraudulent access to systems and networks that in a way that couldn't be done before. So I think that's a category. You can think about categories around the software side, around bypassing certain controls. But I think misinformation is a big part of it. I think getting to your second question, which is, how do you combat that? I think is another good one. I was going to toss it to Mark, and Mark and I can kind of, cover that.
So if I think about fraud, traditionally, we've been doing fraud mitigation, kind of looking at attacks for years, traditional AI. I think the key here is how do you blend traditional AI with Gen AI stuff too? But let me just give you a little bit of like what have we seen in fraud? So AT&T, since we're connectivity company, a lot of the fraud we have is identity theft, right? People posing as somebody else and ultimately trying to steal phones. Huge issue for the entire industry. There's billions of dollars at risk there. Traditional AI, interesting fact is the attacks are up 3x over the last 2 years, okay? The fraudsters are probably doing automation. We kind of joke that we're holding daily stand-ups. They're probably holding daily stand-ups as well, right? What are they going to do on all these attacks there? So fraud attacks are up 3x. Now, fortunately, all of our methods, we're actually going down in absolute fraud that slips through pretty significantly. Traditional AI, we're scoring across all the channels. So care, retail, online. Anytime somebody touches something, think of putting something in the cart to do something. Think of changing your address, adding a line, all that stuff. Every single one of those things, we score that as a risk. What's the risk of this thing happening? What's the risk of this thing happening, given everything else I've seen happening on this account, okay? So all that stuff, and if you looked at it, it's probably 10 million data points a day that we're correlating to figure out what's going on there. Now, the Gen AI stuff, we're trying to put on top of that. Now, what do we do? So after you highlight a risk, somebody has to look at it. So we still have humans looking. Some things we know is definitely stopped, so we kind of stop it off the bat. Some things you still have to diagnose. Now, those things, how do you put Gen AI on top of that? It's the same thing, almost like in the care, is you want to start asking questions. And now, in the past, they might have to pull data. They might have to write some SQL. What if I just put ask data on top of that? So now the agents, which are not maybe SQL savvy, they can ask questions. We'll go ahead and pull that information for them, and they can correlate it there, right? On top of that, on the operations side, we have something that we call Ops GPT. Okay, how do you run your operation with Gen AI? So Ops GPT takes a combination of documents, okay, wiki pages, source code, and then it has data, has alarms, it has databases, right? So when something looks peculiar or something goes wrong, we get in and we start asking questions in Ops GPT. It'll automatically pull the right documents to explain it, it'll pull the right data. And ultimately, we're getting down to a root cause that it diagnoses. So we have tools and agents all working together to do that too. So that's kind of cool on top of it. Now, other Gen AI stuff, if you think about anything that is kind of a pattern, you have patterns that are normal patterns. So think about the entire journey, okay? You can actually train it on all of those journeys. You could build your own foundational model per se. And when you're predicting the next word, just like in a sentence, you're predicting the next thing the customer is likely to do. If they don't do that, then you flag it, okay? So you can do that as well. And then if I think about chat, right? The fraudsters typically use a common talk track, right? Think of the Nigerian prince scam, right? It's the same thing, right? So you see those patterns somewhere there too, and you can find issues there as well. So there's a ton of issues, traditional AI blended with Gen AI to kind of go after the whole fraud, cybersecurity type approach.
Yeah, and then voice detection as well, right? So what I would say is, maybe to summarize, like Mark kind of hit it, but the holy grail here is not just generative AI, it's combining generative AI with traditional AI with automation. Like that's where the magic happens. And I think you'd summarize it, how do you combat the new threats that will be created through generative AI? It's through AI, right? You fight AI with good AI. And with our security team, like we have great partnership there and really a lot of synergy doing that for AT&T.
Thank you. What one or two things are you most excited about on the generative AI front that is happening?
Well, my boss asks me about this every day, which is I'm most excited about, really executing these use cases across AT&T. Like if we do this right, we will create significant and meaningful value at the scale of AT&T. And that excites me. It excites me that collectively across the company that we can lean into this new technology, do things that are truly cutting edge, and find ways to improve the way we serve our customers and that we serve our shareholders. So that's super exciting.
What about you, Mark?
Yeah, so let me kind of build on the use cases. So when you look at 500 use cases, you typically find patterns, okay? All of these are question and answer. All of these are summarization, maybe a summarization of transcripts. Multiple groups want to summarize transcripts, right? And you start saying, I need to build something at the kind of corporate level that people can just use, and then they don't have to recode everything. So that's kind of what we're doing now. We're looking at all these use cases, so we'll take the top ROI one. It needs 10 things. If I build those 10 things, all these other ones can use some of those 10 things, okay? So finding those common patterns, like we're gonna launch Ask Documents. So that is bring your own knowledge, your own documents to Ask AT&T without coding. We'll ingest it, we'll do the lookup, and you can ask questions all under our back, assuming you have the right permissions there, right? Do the same thing for Ask Data. We'll do the same thing for Combo. And we'll kind of find common summarization, those type of things too. So that's kind of a cool pattern. The other one that excites me is even if we do that, there's still a lot of customization in those things. There's some things that are somewhat simple patterns. I've been dubbing this one thing, I call it the LLM workflow. What's the LLM workflow? You got a document, you want to have an LLM do something with the document, extract something, summarize something, then you get an output and you want to take some action. That simple pattern is something that we can democratize without coding as a drag and drop type thing. There's some tools out there that we're looking at those. So this LLM workflow, just like we've been democratizing AI, we're turning data analysts into data scientists, we're going to turn business folks into data analysts or be able to do this thing, right? So we're really excited about the democratization of Gen AI with this LLM workflow too.
I'm going to add what has most excited me. We have created something very new for the company that in the industry that did not exist. We created a governance framework. We've created a mechanism to protect AT&T. And I have to say, if there's a case study that is done years later, looking back at this year and this experience, that we have created a group of leaders that have been laser focused on working together to support our priorities and our goals and mitigating risk, and that's amazing. I don't want to take up time listing all of the names of folks that have literally received phone calls from me, pings, text messages from every last one of us to participate in this effort. But I would say this year has been an amazing thing from a leadership perspective, collaboration perspective, and really moving the needle from a governance as well as technology view that there will be hopefully case studies written later that attest to the greatness that has happened this year.
And just to clarify, when you say we, it's truly cross-organizational.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm looking at one of the key contributors right now from a security perspective. The partnership that I've developed even with the privacy team, the legal team. No, you said it earlier, right? Lawyers typically are really looking at risk only, and we have experienced, wait a minute, we have an opportunity to add value to the business. Let's think about how we can make it happen versus what we cannot do. So this has been a very amazing, amazing experience. And I got a chance to hear from other companies last week at a conference of they're still trying to figure this out. We figured out something very quickly, put it in place, we've iterated as we've learned. Again, an amazing experience.
The funny thing is our legal folks were so cautious in the beginning, and all of a sudden they have like 40 use cases in the front door themselves. So it's pretty cool how they're using it as well.
Yes. Yes. Do we have any questions?
We do have some questions. We have some questions online here. Our first one, what are your thoughts on the recent Biden administration executive order on AI? And I believe that's dealing with having AI developers share their information with the government before making it public.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about this. I mean, you're right. For the AI creators, there are some requirements, and I think they're very, very reasonable. But for the companies like AT&T, we put a lot of time, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this, turning what we had, which were operating guidelines for AI, into our AI policy. And I think we felt a lot of comfort really in that executive order, that a lot of the thought process that we put into our policy came through in that executive order. So we feel like we're very much aligned with a lot of things that came out of that. Artecia, I don't know if you want to add anything to it.
I actually got a chance to meet some of the people that weighed in on the executive order last week. And I will have to say we as a company are in a very good position, from even the leadership directives that's part of it, the governance framework that we've put in place, even some of the things when we're thinking through threat modeling, red teaming. There's a lot that already is in place within AT&T. And we have quite a few folks that are working to, again, protect us, make sure we're not leaking IP data in any kind of way, and I think we're in a very good position. One thing I'll point out is when we created the AI policy, we looked at industry standards. We looked at what was in place. We looked at what was happening in Europe versus what was happening in the United States. Then when new things got published, we reassessed, and we've now reassessed multiple times, and we have iterated based upon that. So I would say we're in a very, very good position.
Yep.
Here's another question from online. Now, from your interactions with others outside of AT&T, what are some of the biggest stumbling blocks of rolling out generative AI across the enterprise?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. We do talk to companies across industry. We talk to a lot of our partners on where they are. It's a fast-moving space. I do think companies, stumble on the legal side, getting all of that in order that they can do this at scale. I think having the partnership that we do with leading-edge generative AI companies has really been an enabler for us. Things that we've been able to fight through. You heard Mark talk about how we've dealt with things like hallucination. We've done that with the help of our partners, not by them selling us services, but by sharing best practices. Looking at code together. Creating that and implementing it across AT&T has allowed us to move fast. And I just think that, one of the other things is, getting across some of the organizational barriers. I mean, this, collectively, AT&T's leaned in and created a very early Silicon Valley type moment, right? We knew this was a game changer. We didn't think about who reported to who, and we've solved it. So I think that's another thing that we've done. But I think comparatively, I'm very happy where we are. I could put a percentage on it, but I won't. I hear that percentage a lot.
Do we have any questions from in the room?
I think three different things. One was generative AI. You talked about traditional AI. You talked about automation. And I've been hearing this thing about Internet of Things. So is that also, are there some use cases where you try to bring that aspect in as well, besides the three things that you focused on? Because I hear a lot about the Internet of Things as well. So I just wanted to know, some of the use cases within specific to the security space.
I'll let Mark answer too. I think the IoT, kind of component, it's the data and the application, right? It's how we apply these tools of traditional AI, generative AI, and automation to help that specific area. Whether it might be, we do a lot in the auto industry, right? Helping, our customers with, with things that are important for like a self-driving car type experience. That's an IoT type application. Applying, traditional AI, generative AI, and automation to that really takes that to the next level. Mark, I don't know if you have other thoughts.
So a couple things. If I go back to that LLM workflow thing, the LLM workflow, you have the orchestration, right? And what we're actually doing is we're leveraging some of the robotic process automation for that, okay? The LLM piece is in the middle. That's something that's, process the LLM. And then you can combine it with traditional AI. Now, one thing with traditional AI is what we've been experimenting with, and I don't know that we have a lot of data on this, but we do have examples where you do your traditional accuracy or lift of your model per se, and then you say, what if I have generative AI stuff on top of that with features? Okay, you can actually build those things. And we do have a few cases where you put them two together and you get better lift, you get better accuracy, you get better finding the bad guys, if I think of the security type of thing. So that's one. I love the idea of combining it together, the traditional AI and the generative AI. IoT, there's, there's certainly security issues there. So, those are patterns. But anything, if you think of how devices talk to a network, that's how we think about it. That is a language in itself. Okay, so a language in itself, how this device talks to the network, how they get on the server, what is the path that they traditionally take to authenticate? That's a pattern. If you look at millions of those things, and then all of a sudden you see an anomaly, if you have this foundational model to how it talks to it, you're going to find those things. And what's hard about traditional things is it's hard to kind of do a sequence of a pattern, but generative AI is naturally that, right? So you naturally predict the next word, the next word, the next paragraph, and that's the whole pattern type of thing. And that's the power that I see.
And where Mark was going, like in many cases, we can leverage, what I would call like generic generative AI, things that others create and we leverage. But where Mark just went is a great example of where we're creating our own foundational models, right? Because that pattern, that data, that sequence, that cadence is very different and very unique to us. So we have to create that foundational model to make that work.
Do we have another question in the room? Hold on. Yes, you need the mic.
All right, is it on? Yeah. You talked about use cases, which I thought was fantastic in decentralizing. I'm curious the guidance you gave for creating the use cases. It sounded like some non-technical teams. And then curious on the criteria, if you could expand on that a little bit for bubbling those up.
I'll give Artecia a lot of props here. We created a kind of a front door that was automated that helped, again, with partnership, that helped the submitter kind of understand what was needed in that. We also created kind of coaching materials that would kind of show the art of the possible, with this. But it's really about, like, we look at a couple core things. We look at everything from a business case perspective. What's the investment? What's the return? For the return, is the return going to be free cash flow impacting? Because there's a lot of things that we can do that are for the good of the company, but we're looking to be much more efficient from a free cash flow perspective as a company, AT&T. So we're hyper focused on that, and then we set some just rough criteria. We believe I have just a general saying that when we spend $1 on AI, we should return 3x. Like, that's a baseline. I think generative AI has even more greenfield opportunity, and we're saying more of a 5x return. So, you spend $1 on this, we should, over time, deliver a 5x return back to the business, and that's the rough criteria we're using, and we have a lot of work to do. Meaning a lot of work coming in. We're not weeding out, we're not filtering out, use cases. We still have a lot that pass that threshold.
I think another thing that we did is we provide lots of examples. So we have a Gen AI office hours every Thursday, and we bring examples there. And then we have data science show, we have data science summit, we have automation summit. The theme of all those things this year was Gen AI. Okay, so when you see 1 example, 2 examples, 10 examples, 50 examples, people start to get it. And the other thing about AT&T is transformation is a bit in our culture. We know how to do ROI business cases because that's what we're always doing. We're always figuring out, how can I get faster? How can I get more efficient, right? So this whole concept is, hey, here's another tool in the toolbox for you to do transformation. People just get it. And then you give them all the examples. They know how to do ROI business cases, and we show them the patterns. And that's why I'm saying it literally blew up, right? 260 use cases in 3 weeks. Now it's at 500, right? So now we're down to patterns and how do we do this efficiently and how do we kind of build things that others can build upon. We're going to have a developer portal, right, where you can go and you can get all the APIs, all the things we built. You're going to use it. You're going to build it on the developer portal. If you have something new, it comes back to the developer portal. So that's the whole culture we're doing.
And one other thing I'd add, Artecia mentioned data and AI governance. It's something we take very seriously. But it's not just about telling people no, right? We do set standards, but we use that forum to evangelize these ideas, what's the art of the possible, and we get the business involved. So it's not just us saying it; we actually bring people in from the business for them to show what they're doing, and I think that's really compelling. Creates a little bit of internal competition. Hey, if that team can do it, I can do it too, and I think it's a flywheel effect.
And I'll add this. One thing, and Dan, I'm going to call you out. You've heard me say this was not something that just came from my brain solely. I took in input from various leaders to make sure I had a really good view of what did we need to ask, number one. But I did have a very clear view that we needed to guide submitters on how to answer the questions. And so I designed a section that was the vision. So even if you were not technical, you should be able to articulate what the ideal outcome you were expecting or looking for was. The second thing was now what's important to the different leaders that are weighing in on the risk. And then lastly, in the event the submitter, they're not technical, I just know I want this widget created. We then actually integrated a process where a technical resource from Mark's team is engaged to help them get through this. Regardless of what the solution is, they're getting some sort of assistance to make sure they round out the rest of the question set. Because believe it or not, most submitters, they're not able to answer every single question because some of them are rather technical. But between Mark's team, also we have engagement managers that are consultants. In addition to my team helping out, we're able to get over the finish line.
And I just said we need to go faster. So that was my help. I think we're at time here. So just wanted to kind of tell everybody thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to be here.